going to start taking you on a tour. Right. Then the first thing you're going to see is the parking lot here.
Towards the end of last summer, I hopped in a pickup truck with the senior horticulturalist at Laurel Hill Cemetery.
This is a plot or lot that's owned by a family. And if you wish, we can get out and take a look.
I wanted to see some of the different gardens he takes care of, and a few that he even designed.
So there's so many things that the garden can provide. And one of the things that was really important to Mrs. Spain was that whenever she visited it, if it should be in June or August or January, March, she wanted it to have green. And this is the first opportunity, especially here, where I designed a garden that was all evergreen.
And that got me thinking about how I work so hard to learn how to plant different plants. Figuring out what ratio makes its ideal soil, how much light and water it needs, what plants go together, hours and hours of research and trial and error to get it right. But I was so focused on if I could plant a garden, I didn't even consider why I should. I'm Meredith Nutting, and this is Gritty and Green, a podcast about truly urban gardening. Each episode will explore the connection between people and plants. We'll learn a little bit about the science and a lot about how to grow a successful urban garden. If you haven't heard the episodes in Season 1, I encourage you to go back and have a listen. I got to speak with some amazing people sharing their gardening knowledge. And this season, I'll be bringing you even more interviews, visits to gardens, and I've even got a team of master gardeners to answer your gardening questions. So let's get growing. The Summer Palace Gardens in China, the Jardin Morgel in Morocco, the Palace of Versailles in France, Longwood Gardens in the US. You can travel around the world, and nearly everywhere you go, you'll be able to find a garden to visit. Each are a feat in horticultural design and botanical expertise. But have you ever thought about how we got from learning to grow food to a society that has over 4,500 botanical gardens worldwide? Of course, that number only reflects the gardens that focus on plant conservation, scientific research, and education. It doesn't include the gardens that Greg works in, and certainly not the gardens that you and I grow. Looking around at pavement devoid of greenery, I understand why purposefully creating gardens in the space between is important and inspiring. But thousands of years ago, when the world was still for the most part lush and green, why work so hard to curate and plant and care for gardens? It all started 12,000 years ago when early humans were first learning how to put a seed in soil so that it would grow food. Agriculture started around 21,000 BCE in different areas of the world. The ability to grow our own food birthed civilization as we know it. But it wasn't until 2000 BCE that gardening for the sake of gardening started in Egypt. Using the Nile for irrigation, ancient peoples planted fruit trees and vegetables. But as time went on and some people became richer, the plants within the garden started to shift. The gardens were arranged with plantings in geometric designs, with large ponds as the centerpiece. New kinds of trees and flowers were brought back from conquests across the region. And around the same time, gardens sprouted up in China, huge swaths of nature that allowed animals to roam and be hunted. Then from around 150 to 350 CE, there were the Roman gardens, taking inspiration from the lands as they conquered them. They were enclosed in courtyards with flowering plants surrounding trees and water features. Like their architecture, the Roman garden ideals stood on three pillars: durability, utility, and beauty. These principles are still prevalent in modern-day garden design. When the Renaissance hit, it wasn't just art and music that was revived, but gardens as well. They became a status symbol, and wealthy families that patroned the old master paintings also commissioned gardens, with designs mirroring the composition, textures, and perspective techniques used by the landscape painters of that time. Unsurprisingly, the first botanical garden opened in Pisa in 1543. Here in the United States, aesthetic gardens didn't really take off into the mid-1800s. The early colonizers grew small kitchen gardens right outside their front door, filled with food, herbs, and medicinal plants. But when the prevalence of produce markets grew, gardens moved away from nourishing plants to ornamental plants. It didn't take too long for the killer of gardens to take over, the grass lawn. By the 1900s, having a well-maintained monoculture of green grass in front of your house was the epitome of high status. Home gardens, vegetable or otherwise, were pushed to the side or even the backyard. During times of crisis, the kitchen gardens briefly popped back into vogue, but lawns still remain king, even today. While they provide an area for occasional recreation, lawns remove valuable space to grow food for people and pollinators. And growing the perfect lawn uses a lot of water, fertilizer, and pesticides. But while it's been hard to fully combat the turf lawns, they have actually been on a slow decline for decades. At first, flowers and ornamental plants started to creep back in, creating a border along the edges of the mowed grass. And then in the 1970s, there was a renewed interest in growing food at home in the form of edible landscaping, mixing food and flowers. Community gardens away from valuable lawn real estate started to become more popular. In the 1990s, when cities were growing faster than ever, there was a focus on smaller container gardens and trellising to fit into our smaller spaces. And now there's a trend to rewild our lawns into native habitat to help our pollinators and wildlife. Over the past 4,000 years of aesthetic gardening, there have been all sorts of gardens. Tea gardens, hanging gardens, moss gardens, rose gardens, sculpture gardens, Zen gardens, rock gardens, just to name a few. Each type of garden has its own history and purpose. If you're new to gardening or looking to enhance your outdoor space, you may feel totally overwhelmed. First, you have to find out what you want your garden to be. Is it a place you want to relax with a good book on a warm summer's day? Is it an outdoor space to get a little bit more exercise? Is it somewhere where you'll want to have parties and friends and big gatherings? Or will it just be for meditation or exploration or a tour de force of your botanical skill? There are so many reasons gardens exist. Before you figure out the how, you need to figure out the why. When I bought my Philadelphia home, I was lucky to have a fairly large backyard, but it was just concrete. This hot slab of 12-inch thick cement was in a way a blessing. It forced me into container gardening for a few years and gave me an opportunity to really observe my space through the seasons. I learned which areas were the sunniest and where the water pooled the most after heavy rains. I learned how I used the space to exercise and lounge and socialize, and that gave me the initial blueprint for how I wanted to lay out my garden once I finally removed the concrete. If you're just starting out designing your garden, I would highly recommend taking a season to observe. Of course, nothing is set in stone, and even though I did create my garden, throughout the years my family has changed, and the trees around me have grown, and the shady spots have become sunny, and the sunny spots have become shady. I've had to adapt my plans, and that's the beauty of gardening. Everything grows, even you. But even if you don't have a garden space, you can still design a really great garden within the confines of a container. Growing plants in a container is fairly straightforward, but to turn your container into a garden takes a little bit of knowing the design rules and when to break them. So let me walk you through how to create a container ornamental garden that you can be proud of. If you've taken just about any art class, this might start to sound a bit familiar. Designing a great garden comes down to a balance of composition, a variety of textures, and a little bit of color theory. Let's start with composition. There's lots to consider when thinking about composition: repetition, symmetry, leading lines, but perhaps the most famous principle is the rule of thirds. To explain this, we'll need to use our imaginations a little, or maybe even get out a piece of paper. Divide it into thirds, first along the horizontal and then again along the vertical. You'll have a grid with 9 squares. If you put your subject right in the middle of that grid, the composition is a little boring, stagnant. But if you put your subject off to the side in one of the thirds, bam, you've got a dynamic composition. This rule of thirds is so ubiquitous that you likely gravitate to compositions that follow it without even realizing it. This can be translated into our container garden if you think about the proportion of pot to plant. You'll want your container to be as short as 1/3 or as tall as 2/3, with the plants taking up the remaining space. You can continue with the rule of thirds when you get to your plant selection. You want the main interest to pull your eye to the upper third or down to the lower third. In garden design, there's a trick to help you follow this rule on your own. And that's by planting thrillers, fillers, and spillers. This fun little rhyme is kind of a cheat sheet to start figuring out the plants you want to use in your container garden. So let's start with the thrillers. These are plants that are eye-catching. They bring the wow factor. They're usually taller with colorful flowers or interesting foliage. Think your elephant ears, canna flowers, or tall spikes of grass. Then at the bottom are the spillers. These are sprawling plants or vines that can spill over the edge of the container, adding some green to the lower third of your composition. Creeping Jenny and sweet potato vines are very popular spillers. And in between the thriller and the spiller is the filler. These tend to be shorter, bushier plants to fill in the space between, making the container look full of life. Petunias, cosmos, and salvia are typical fillers. Just planting with those 3 things in mind will already create a container garden that looks intentional and exciting. But if you want to go a step further, you'll want to think about texture. The surface of the leaves and petals of the plants that you are using. When we talk about texture with plants, we use terms like fine, medium, and coarse. Fine textured plants have small leaves or flowers. They fill in the spaces without taking our attention. Think about the delicate fronds of fennel or lavender. On the other end, we have coarse texture. Those are big leaves that demand your attention, like hostas, for example. Most of the plants that we use actually fall in between fine and coarse and are referred to as medium textured. You can create more interest in your container garden by using plants with different textures. Finally, we have color. In plants, we have so much to think about with color. There's the color of the flower, but there's also the color of the leaves. And you can go in so many different directions. You can keep everything all one color. We call that monochromatic. This could be plants all with amazing green foliage. But in gardening, green can also fade into the background as a neutral, and your monochromatic garden can be flowers of all one color. To add more interest to a monochromatic palette, look to include lighter and darker hues. You can also go with analogous colors. Those are colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. You remember the color wheel, right? So yellow and orange, or orange and red, or maybe purple and blue, or blue and green. Each of these pairs adds a pleasing splash of color to your garden. Finally, we've got the excitement of complementary colors. These are colors on opposite sides of the color wheel, and combined they are naturally pleasing and add contrast that creates a bit of pop and pizzazz. So red and green, orange and blue, yellow and purple, those are all fantastically contrasted complementary color pairs. So those are the basic design rules. But of course, rules were made to be broken, so go ahead, you do you. No matter your design, a container garden is a glorious thing. Even that little pot of plants can really brighten up somebody's day. And that's really why we're gardening, right? To feel happy and maybe spread a bit of happiness onto others. And that's what brought me to Laurel Hill Cemetery to learn more from Greg about how to create a feeling with a garden.
What we wanted to do here is make it pleasant and enjoyable. And I love movement in the garden. So one of the things I chose was this grass. It's called Hakinokloa, or some people, it's called Japanese woodland grass. But even on the lightest breezy days, there's always movement. And it kind of brings just a gentle softness and activity to the space, which I really like.
I don't know that I've heard, like I've done a lot of, research about how to make a good garden design, but I don't know that I've heard movement.
Oh,
That's
yes,
so nice.
yeah. It's so many things should be considered. If you start to approach designing garden from an experience, all of a sudden it starts to you really think, oh yeah, it isn't about color or height always. It's about how I'm going to feel when I'm going through the space, how others are going to go through the space. Here's a good example of the movement, with the breeze. I grew up in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. I was very fortunate to have woods nearby, really part of my parents' property. And that's where I played as a kid. I mean, had a creek, had woods, found all the wildflowers, and it just became a part of my existence. So by the time I was 8 or 9, I was seriously into gardening. As serious as an 8-year-old perhaps could be.
His interest in plants only grew, and while some preteens spent their time at the mall, Greg was nerding out on plants and attending meetings with the American Iris Society.
By the time I was 15, 16, I knew that horticulture was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And it's been great because it's not only my passion, but it's also my career.
Greg started his own small private landscaping company before moving into public gardens starting in 2005 at the Mount Cuba Center. He later helped open the Delaware Botanical Gardens until he ended up at the Laurel Hill Cemetery.
And I had friends that said, "You're going to be a horticulturist at a cemetery?" And I would say, "It's an arboretum as well."
Between the east and west locations, Laurel Hill has 265 acres, housing a living collection of over 6,500 trees and shrubs comprised of more than 950 species.
It's pretty vast, all the things that need to be known and done in the arboretum. And it has been an amazing learning experience.
You may have the impression that cemeteries are just mowed lawns and a couple of trees that provide shade to the mourners visiting their loved ones' headstones. At least I did. But that couldn't be farther from the truth at Laurel Hill.
Our first and foremost focus at the cemetery is as a place of eternal rest. But more recently, they came up with 3 pillars: place of eternal rest, civic engagement or civic value, and recreation.
Visitors are welcome to bring life into the cemetery. You can walk or bike on the arboretum paths at both locations. You can even bring dogs and picnics. And one of the very special things about Laurel Hill is that it is one of the few cemeteries in the area that provide green burials.
Green burial at the cemetery came about out of public demand. People said, "We want a green burial option."
Before the 1860s, green burials were the norm, but embalming became commonplace during the Civil War, giving families of soldiers that died on the battlefields far from home a chance to see their loved ones before they were buried. The process of embalming uses toxic chemicals, and the strong caskets are meant to keep the body and the soil from ever mixing. At best, they keep us out of the natural cycle where decomposition feeds new life. And at worst, they poison the environment. Even cremation pollutes the air with particles that are carcinogenic to the folks living around the crematoriums. But green burials not only put our bodies back into the soil, providing nutrients to new plants, they also protect the environment that they are buried in by creating a natural but sacred space.
It's a simple process to burial that does not involve embalming. It's all organic. And so a person is buried, it will be a pine box, a wicker box, something like a shroud, with the thought that once this degrades and they become one with the earth, it's pretty special. And there's a positive impact on the environment as opposed to anything negative. So this is Nature Sanctuary.
Laurel Hill has 3 green burial sites. Each is slightly different, but I can tell that Nature Sanctuary has a special place in Greg's heart.
So almost everything I've added to this garden has been first and foremost for its wildlife value. And then if it happens to be a pretty color, it has seasonality, then I'm fortunate. And it's worked out really well, it really has. It's always changing. It never looks the same. Even during a year, it really does change. Nature Sanctuary is a successional meadow. So that means right now you're going to see a lot of sun-loving plants and open areas with some trees coming in. And eventually more and more trees will be planted as it's filled with interments, and more shrubs, more trees. Eventually it becomes a mature forest. It's just incredible to see the variety of mammals and birds that have utilized this space. So it's also a habitat. So it's pretty cool. It's good for the families because they can come, they know where their loved one is buried, and at the same, it's maintained as a wildflower garden, basically. People come in and say, "Oh my goodness, this is so pretty." One woman, her mother had been buried in Nature Sanctuary, said, "Mom loved to garden, and how much comfort it gives our family to know she now is buried in a garden." So pretty cool.
Wandering the path through the meadow, you almost forget that you're in the city. And listening to the birds and winds go through the trees, it creates a peaceful place to reflect. Possibly on the loved ones whose resting bodies are nourishing the blooms that are buzzing with bees. While we were there, Greg showed me another aspect of garden design I hadn't even thought of: fragrance.
So this is one of them, which I love to show people. You're just gonna go bonkers with this. I'll pick some so you can take it with you. So crush the foliage in your fingers and look and smell it.
Ooh.
Everybody loves it.
Yeah, that's such a...
Isn't it wonderful? It's fruity.
Yeah, it's like pineapple, like...
So
Oh my
it
God,
is an
so good.
agastache. It's got a square stem, so it's in the mint family. And you can make a delightful simple syrup from the leaves and or the flowers. Which is wonderful. And then this is commonly found here. We have a lot of this. This is a bee balm. And this one happens to be Monarda fistulosa, which bloomed in June. But you rub that one, and I'm going to say it smells almost like oregano.
Fragrance, whether it's a tangy odor or a floral aroma, plays so strongly in our experience of a place or even time. Scents and memories and emotions are so intertwined, it could be an important consideration when designing a garden, particularly one at your own home. While Greg works on hundreds of acres at the cemetery, he also has a small urban garden of his own.
When at the cemetery, I can think big. I can think large scale and lots of space and vastness. At home, I have a little backyard, which is maybe, 10 feet by 20. It was a former lot. And there's square foot gardening, and I feel like I do square inch gardening, And I have this want to have every plant under the sun, including orchids and tropicals. And I've been able to figure out less is more. Have the plants that give me the most joy. I even have little troughs like a rock garden. I have little shade area, some native plants, of course. I have an espaliered apple tree and a espaliered witch hazel, and lots of containers. And so
I have learned to make the most out of the space that I have. And it's about the experience. When I come into the little space that I've got, I can walk from one end to the other end in about 20 seconds. But when you add the plants and you add points of interest and you add different heights, different shapes, you can spend almost an hour in that little garden just looking at all the different things that are there. Even though it's small scale, it's something I can take care of, and it gives me an awful lot of pleasure.
Of course, I had to ask Greg for some tips.
For anybody that wants to do urban gardening or small scale, you can do a container out the front of your house if you don't have a backyard. Containers are a great way for people to, especially if they don't want to necessarily garden down on the ground or kneeling, a container can often be waist height and easy to garden with, and a lot of changeover. You can put in different annuals. Vegetables can be grown. A lot of possibilities. I suggest bigger containers just because of vandalism or people tipping them over, whatever it can be. That's pretty unusual. But the bigger containers could either be you have a seasonal display that changes of annuals or tropicals, or you have a more permanent planting. So herbs are another thing that can really be a lot of fun, because if you forget to water them, they're usually pretty forgiving. They're from the Mediterranean, so they can go through dry periods.
Herbs like lavender, thyme, sage, and oregano. A lot of these can also overwinter in our area. And talk about fragrant. You'd be giving every passerby a waft of aromatic herbs that just may inspire their dinner, or send them into a memory of spending time in their grandmother's garden. Of course, then there's Greg's backyard.
This space that I have, there's a certain amount of flat garden space, soil, if you will. Then there's these walls. Using every bit of space often means you go up. And I've trained an apple tree to be on a flat surface. I've done the same with a witch hazel. And so that way, these walls that would normally not have anything to look at have some greenery and something. It's like the garden comes from the ground up the walls. I have planters on the walls. I have lots of lush growing vines that come up the fence, and really trying to cover every little space that I have. What can go there? Will I put a container there, or will I have something in the ground there?
But the best way to find out what will work for your space is to experiment. Some ideas may succeed and fill you with the joy of accomplishment, and others may fail horribly. But with each experiment, you'll learn more and more about how to create your own unique garden.
It's really about thinking, what do you want your garden to bring back to you? What do you want to get out of it? The experience of it. It may be very simple. It may be pretty complex. But it's really about joy and happiness, I think, for all of us.
That was Greg Tepper, the senior horticulturalist at Laurel Hill Cemetery. You can find out more about the Arboretum and its projects, ranging from Christmas tree recycling with goats to rewilding the embankment by Kelly Drive, by visiting their website, laurelhillphl.com. And if you want to learn more about green burials, check out the panel Green Philly conducted with Greg and his colleagues at the cemetery last year. I'll put a link for that in the show notes. And now, this is the part of the show where you can get your garden questions answered. Did you know that there's a hotline where you can ask questions and master gardeners will be on call to answer them? It's an extremely useful service. In fact, I've used it myself to find gardeners with expertise in areas that I'm just not that knowledgeable in. This season, I'll be inviting members of the hotline team onto future episodes to answer some of the tricky gardening questions they've received in the past and to help with yours. No question is too basic or too small. and sharing it here will help other gardeners learn and grow. I'll put the information about how to submit a question both directly to Gritty and Green or to the hotline in the show notes. Thank you for joining me to learn all about designing gardens with experience in mind. And a very big thank you to Greg Tepper for taking me around the beautiful Laurel Hill Cemetery and sharing some of his very own small gardening tips. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please like, review, and share it. And if you have a garden question, email it to grittyandgreen@coolgoonproductions.com. I'll put that address in the show notes as well. Until next time, decide what experience you want in your garden and grow it. Gritty and Green is presented by Green Philly in collaboration with Cool Goon Productions. It was written, directed, and edited by me, Meredith Nutting. Theme music by Kazuya. If you want more information about local sustainability, go to greenphl.com.